What happens when the whole world goes into a state of panic, completely paralyzed by a state of fear? In this study, we're going to look at the current world crises, and we're going to go very, very deep into world politics. But at the end, I will give a spiritual solution. Entertainment is a clever way of selling us war. And world conflict can never really be resolved, and hostilities between tribes, races and religions will continue to escalate, especially when it is sold to us on a daily basis. People may be shocked at current events, and though many claim to hate war, we unconsciously become complicit when we constantly feed our minds to the lure of it in entertainment. But sometimes entertainment can cleverly condition the public's thinking, where we, in the West, believe that we are victims and champions of world peace, and those outside of our terrain are heartless subhumans. This is called engineering consent, where you coerce the public into believing the mainstream narrative that is still based upon colonial lines, where you can whip up the public's emotions in a state of hysteria, not giving them a chance to check the facts for themselves. When innocent civilians were brutally killed in France in the second weekend of November 2015, people panicked. Others were enraged. Others didn't know what to think or what to do. Whenever a tragic event takes place, many want to be the first to give the correct view. And since 9/11, both secular and religious reporters are missing the point. Radical Islam has been cleverly used and manipulated to achieve a much wider global program. Every time a terrorist attack occurs in the West, more and more freedoms are stripped away from the civilian population, and the governments have more access into your private space, and the police and intelligence agencies become more and more militarized, where shoot-to-kill policy now exists in the UK, and all over the world, everyone is feeling the pinch. Because we look at the world through the lens of the West, we are ignorant to other people's sufferings. French flags flooded social media in an act of solidarity from what took place on Friday the 13th. But why were there not flags of Lebanon flown in solidarity with bomb attacks that killed innocent lives that took place the day before? It all boils down to how the media conditions our minds on how we are to view the world. The Vision for Humanity is a product of the Institute for Economics and Peace, a global think tank that measures the relative positions of nations and regions' peacefulness. Studies have shown that terrorism has risen over the last 15 years, where 9 times more people were killed in terrorist attacks today than there were in 2000. In 2014, 32,658 lives were lost to terrorism, the highest number recorded, and an 80% increase from 2013. This is crazy and very sad. What is very downplayed by the Western news is that 78% of these deaths are not in the West, but are in Afghanistan, Iraq, Nigeria, Pakistan, and Syria.
The United States unilaterally could do almost anything it needs to do to root out Boko Haram. It would be a long-term effort, but it could be done. And the United States has the capability. All the elements of power, we have those.
So why not?
It's not a priority. That's the problem. We are committed elsewhere in the world. Black West Africa is not a priority. Very stark, very hard to say, but that's the case right now.
Nigeria has been constantly hit with terror attacks by Boko Haram. And when the Charlie Hebdo massacre took place in Paris, where 15 people were killed, many started to question why was Nigeria's reign of terror that took place at the same time where 2,000 were killed did not receive the same media coverage, or was blatantly ignored. And on Friday the 13th, when everyone was in shock about Paris's terror, the Western news was totally silent at the terror that took place in Nigeria on the exact same day by Boko Haram. Interesting. This map of the world shows the countries that are most affected by terrorism. The darker the area, the greater increase of attacks. Though it has documented that at least 51% of these attacks are committed by either ISIL or Boko Haram, one thing has been overlooked: who commits the rest. On a website called Intercept.com, a whistleblower released secret documents of the US's assassination drone strikes in Afghanistan, Yemen and Somalia that has way more casualties than in the West. Video game minded youth come straight out of college, they are given a joystick, mark a target and then wipes out whole families and sometimes neighborhoods just looking for one man. While many Christians are quick to say these are the last days when we are attacked in the West, when it happens to others, we close a blind eye to their last days, when they are blown apart by a drone and no apology is given to the innocent civilians who are blown to pieces. What about the soldiers from the English-speaking world in Canada, the United States and the UK, who are killing themselves on a daily basis, where they are psychologically messed up, who can't cope with witnessing the horrors, seeing their colleagues blown to pieces in front of their very eyes, and families are torn apart because they can't replace that loss? Do we mourn for them? And who benefits from all this? One of them are the defense contractors. These corporations make a huge profit from war. $138 billion was made from the war in Iraq alone. And what is even more scary is that they know that it is making the world more and more unstable. In Bloomberg Business magazine, the war from Syria to the Ukraine has boosted sales. And one of the managers of Lockheed Martin says there's no doubt the world is getting to be more and more a dangerous place, but is still only interested in selling aircraft and artillery. In Fortune magazine, it also recalls the rise of military sales, where it said, driven by regional unrest, foreign militaries are generally looking to upgrade their security forces with the latest systems that can give them a technological edge, says Guggenheim Securities analyst Roman Schweizer. Are these men actually aware that they are fulfilling the divine program of Matthew chapter 24 verses 5 and 6 that prophetically describes the rapid and intense hostility of nation states? In order to understand what happened in France, you need to understand all these factors, where evidence is constantly leading up to the war in Syria, where the majority of jihadis are not only known to Western intelligence, but they have been trained by Western intelligence. And the West is now suffering from blowback. That is a repercussion of their own trained fanatics, as the president of Syria confirms.
So many people will leave because of the terrorism and because they want to earn their living somewhere in this world. So the West is crying for them, and the West is supporting terrorists in the beginning of this crisis, when it said that it was a peaceful uprising, as they called it, when they said later it's moderate opposition, and now they say there's terrorists like al-Nusra and ISIS, but because of the Syrian state or Syrian regime or the Syrian president. So as long as they follow this propaganda, they will have more refugees. So it's not about Europe didn't accept them or inbred them as refugees. It's about not dealing with the cause. Stop, if you are worried about them, stop supporting terrorists. That's what we think regarding the crisis. This is the core of the whole issue of refugees.
Under the French general Joseph Eugene Girard, Syria was once a French colony from 1923 to 1946, when the huge territory of the former Ottoman Empire was divided into new states between Britain and France. But one of the sad factors of the Syrian refugee crisis is that the United Nations, who is pushing the Sustainable Development Agenda to reduce world poverty, has been exposed by London's Daily Mail newspaper as receiving £1 billion in foreign aid from the UK to help Syrian refugees, and most of the cash is not accounted for. It has gone missing. And instead of providing food, medicine and shelter in camps, the aid money is covering administration costs. But they say that cash donations are running out. On top of that, it is now difficult to discern who is genuinely running from the horrors of war and sincerely seeking asylum, and who is disguised as a covert jihadi. For if jihadis can brag how they can freely cross Europe's borders, this will now make innocent people targets of retaliation for the massacre in France, has definitely created a hostile fear and distrust among communities. And seeing that terror creates panic among civilians, the refugee crisis will be exploited by a clever strategy called coercive engineered migration. Harvard-educated professor Kelly M. Greenhill, a member of the faculty of Tufts University, wrote a book called Weapons of Mass Migration, where she showed that forced displacement can be used as an instrument of foreign policy to destabilize other states. And one of the best examples of engineering migration as a weapon of war is the Muslim region of Kosovo.
All right, listen to me. Go to the next bedroom. Under the bed.
Tell me when you're there.
Now, the next part is very important. They're going to take you.
Kidnapping women and using them for the sex industry is one of the chief trades of one of the most feared group of men in the world, the Albanian Mafia. How did this Muslim crime syndicate from the Balkans rise to such prominence? Like the Afghan Mujahideen and the Syrian fighters, the Kosovo Liberation Army was incorporated into the Albanian Mafia, where they were trained by the CIA in the 1998-1999 Kosovo War in the Balkans, where they used drug money to finance their war. And with Islamic connections, they have a monopoly over the Golden Crescent, the open fields in Afghanistan and Pakistan, where they supply most of the heroin to Europe and are fully established in the United States. But they also have targeted Britain, where they have full control over the vice industry, where women are prostituted for a living, and even young children are profited in the people smuggling industry. What is even more interesting is that this chain of events that has spread throughout Kosovan refugees can be traced to Kosovo's Prime Minister, Hashim Thaki, who has been accused of being involved in organ trafficking, arms deals and the drug trade, but nothing will happen to him. He was supported by Madeleine Albright while a guerrilla fighter in the Kosovan War, where she was instrumental in separating Kosovo from Serbia, and she still supports him till this very day. And as you can clearly see, he has full support of some of the highest ranking officials in the US government, where they close a blind eye to this criminal network. Do you want to know why? Camp Bondsteel is described as the largest overseas military airbase in Kosovo, so that the US can have access to the oil and gas in the Caspian Sea, even though Kosovo is one of Europe's poorest countries. And now the United States is remaining in this former communist Ottoman Empire region for business, where ex-US diplomats have set up shop. Madeleine Albright, the former US Secretary of State and Georgetown professor, has set up a company that has a 75% share in the state telecom PTK called Albright Capital Management. It's all about business. Wesley Clark, who was the retired general of the US Army and Supreme Allied Commander of Europe of NATO during the Kosovo War, is the chairman of Envidity, a Canadian energy company that wants to explore lignite coal deposits and produce synthetic fuel. Bill Clinton, who led the bombing campaign in Kosovo, not only has a statue erected of him with the American flag, but in Kosovo's capital Pristina, he has a street named after him, Bill Clinton Boulevard. That's blatant US imperialism. And Bechtel, the fourth largest privately owned company in the United States, also has invaded the heart of Kosovo. So war can be manipulated through migration and US corporate geopolitical interests, even if it means flooding criminal gangs and jihadis among refugees to destabilize the region and to achieve an objective. But where is all this chaos in France leading to? Is there an overall goal? What is the overall aim? Like 9/11, it has led to a shift in foreign policy in each nation state, and this will allow more cohesion among countries that were once hostile to each other, where they will all work more closely together and eventually bring the whole world in line with a much broader plan.
And people in Europe need to understand that there is a war that is becoming global, that is being waged against civilian populations in particular. It is a form of neo-imperialism and neo-colonialism which aims to divide and conquer European and Middle Eastern and African and the world's population for that matter, and to make them submit to a global order that does not serve the interests of most of the people on this planet, but that does serve the interests of a very few ruling elite, a very small, tiny, and particularly tyrannical ruling elite.
Roger, what kind of coordinated steps now can President Obama, Francois Hollande, Angela Merkel, who's saying that she was deeply shaken by these events in Paris, do now to push back?
You're going to be seeing all the different intelligence agencies working at a heightened level of cooperation, more than they typically do right now.
In cyber, we have to have, at the end of the day, coalition of the goods, because if we do not cooperate in the issue of cyber, the bads will win. And this is an area in which we have to do whatever is needed to find the way to cooperate. Otherwise, our capability to deal with the bad forces around the world, either states or individuals, will be reduced to level that at the end of the day will not be enough to deal with this threat. And if there is something in the new arena of the 21st century relating to cooperation within intelligence agencies, but not only intelligence, it's also about the way to protect, which is out of the intelligence. This is the area that we should...
That meeting was held as part of the second annual Ethos and Profession of Intelligence Conference that was co-hosted by the CIA and George Washington University, just 2 weeks before the attacks in Paris, France. And the intelligence panel consisted of John Brennan, the current head of the US's CIA, the former head of the UK's MI6 John Sawyers, and very interestingly, the French Directorate for External Security Bernard Bachelet, discussing the future of the security for the 21st century, where former Israeli National Security Advisor echoed what Roger Creasy, the former White House counterterrorism advisor, told Bloomberg after the Paris attacks, that everyone in the intelligence community must now work together. This now opens the door for another power to step in and very cleverly take advantage of the chaos. And the only way of understanding how she works is by digging deep into the Holy Scriptures and looking at the author who guided the prophetic books that harmonize with each other, Daniel and Revelation. The author in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 5 and Revelation chapter 1 and verse 13 is described as clothed. In Daniel chapter 10 verse 5 and Revelation chapter 1 and verse 13 again, he also has a golden girdle. In Daniel chapter 10 and verse 6 and Revelation chapter 1 and verse 14, he has eyes like fire. In Daniel chapter 10 and verse 6 and Revelation chapter 1 and verse 16, his face is as lightning or the sun. And in Daniel chapter 10 and verse 6 and Revelation chapter 1 and verse 15, he has arms and feet like brass. This is describing Jesus, the author and finisher of our faith. And the last world power in both Daniel and Revelation has 10 horns. In Daniel chapter 7 and verse 23 it reads, "Thus he said, the fourth beast shall be, or symbolically represents, the fourth kingdom upon the earth, which shall be diverse from all kingdoms, and shall devour the whole earth, and shall tread it down and break it in pieces." Describing the same system in Revelation chapter 13 and verse 4, it reads, "And they," describing the whole earth, "worshipped," which means they gave homage to, "the dragon," who represents Satan in Revelation chapter 12 verse 9 and Revelation chapter 20 and verse 1, which gave power unto the beast or kingdom. And they worshipped the beast, saying, and listened to the awe and adoration from the entire world. Who is like unto the beast, and who is able to make war with him? No one. And the last world power these prophecies are describing is the papacy, the longest running, richest geopolitical system on earth, that is headed by Mr. Bergoglio, Pope Francis I. He has cleverly whipped up the masses into papal hype, making people believe that he is meek and that he is pushing for world peace. But that simplicity is a smokescreen. The Catholic press said that if you are to understand Pope Francis, we must look to the Jesuits. Jesuit priest Michael Sheeran is the president of the Association of Jesuit Colleges and Universities in the United States. And on NBC News, it described Pope Francis I as the first Jesuit pope. And Michael Sheeran told NBC News that behind that simplicity hides a steely determination to advance Jesuit principles. Remember, these are their own words. That determination emerged during Bergoglio's service as the top Jesuit leader of Argentina beginning in 1973, Sheeran said, noting he was a tough guy who made sure his men toed the mark. So he's an autocrat with a very dark track record of complicity in Argentina's dirty war that consisted of fear, kidnappings, torture, and murder. And he offers a cheap form of salvation, one that is without God. And this is based upon Jesuit humanism in the Ratio Sudorium. This is why he is so embraced by the world. He feeds the unchangeable secular paganism. He has at his disposal the most ancient and the most experienced State Department in existence, where he can skillfully manage with his government peoples, multitudes, nations, and tongues. No other system in history has dealt with so many races, nations, kingdoms, empires, and heads of state, covering a length of almost 20 centuries and the width of 5 continents. The Vatican's website shows that she has diplomatic relations with 180 states. And as you scroll down, it shows each country in alphabetical order and the year it started diplomatic relations with the Holy See. To use the prophetic language of Revelation chapter 17 and verse 2 and chapter 18 and verse 3, describing her global influence, the kings of the earth have committed fornication with her, or in layman's terms, they have formed an unholy alliance with papal Rome to enhance their own self-interest. What will the papacy do with its global influence? The insignia on the top left, Novus Ordo Seclorum, represents the New World Order. But the papacy has her own environmental logo on the top right, and they will use that issue, which was a clever inroad to unite the world nations under the guise of climate change. The official website of the think tank, the Club of Rome, endorses the papal encyclical of Pope Francis I. It says that, like the Vatican, the Club of Rome says that to solve our climate problems and build a fair society, nature and society must be placed before economics and short-term profit. Both the Pope and the Club of Rome also agree that politicians need to do what they are elected to do, which means regulate especially emissions and the finance sector. It almost seems that the terrorist attacks in Paris, France, took place at the right time, for it was in the same month and in the same location world leaders would be gathered to discuss the climate agenda to help resolve the world's poverty, or to be a bit more blunt, another step to usher in world government at the 2015 UN Climate Conference in Paris, the COP21. And who are the strongest advocates and driving force for COP21? The papacy, the system that everybody seems to overlook and bypass. There are a few who have caught on to the climate agenda hoax, for as you scroll through the UN's plan for the climate conference, it is designed to bully rich nations to accept a global mandate where there is no resistance. It almost seems that everything looks very well calculated, for when the Pope addressed the UN and Congress, he said we must unite against extremism. And at the United Nations meeting in that same week, the nations of the world followed the lead of the Pope and united to defeat extremism. And Russia, though an ally of Syria's President Assad, is now working with the United States to defeat ISIS, when Russia was compared to ISIS at the beginning of the year. Very interesting. The Western manufactured ISIS has confirmed that she is going to strike fear and terror around the world. These guys are crazy, for not only are they bloodthirsty jihadis, it has recently been discovered that they have taken an illegal drug sold on the black market called Captagon that turns them into superhuman soldiers, where they can patrol at night without worrying about being tired or ever falling asleep. This will definitely strike fear into people, where they will now view innocent Muslims with suspicion, which is quite sad considering that on the official website of the FBI, Muslims make up about 6% of terrorist attacks that are carried out on the US soil between 1980 and 2005. Other groups far outweigh acts of terrorism, but you won't hear about this in the media. This has been confirmed by Wired, and on the European continent, Europol have produced yearly studies on terrorism in Europe, where Islamic terrorists carried out 3 attacks on EU territory. Separate groups, on the other hand, were responsible for 160 attacks, while left-wing and anarchist groups were responsible for 45 attacks. And a survey by the Pew Research Center showed that all the Muslim nations interviewed, on a whole, especially Lebanon, think that ISIS are a bunch of bloodthirsty, godforsaken psychopaths. Our minds and emotions can definitely be manipulated by the information that is given to us. Let us now summarize this study. When you attack Muslim groups or countries, they retaliate. Just what happened with Russia. When they retaliate, it brings sworn enemies together, with the highest diplomats and heads of state like Sergei Lavrov and Pope Francis I, strengthens even deeper ties. It also allows governments to strip more and more freedoms from the civilian population under the guise of "we are trying to protect you." This now produces fear and panic, where people are now afraid to make any critical view or make a challenging statement about the government for fear of reprisals. And the globalization strategy, under the name of the war on terror, is the road leading to the mark, the image, and the number of the beast. Europol is now tightening its grip, and the members of the European Union are pushing for tighter security, and the head of Europol says Europe is in a crisis and prepare for more attacks. When Jesus was describing the last generation on earth, he said that men's hearts will be failing them for fear and for looking after those things which are coming on the earth, for the powers of heaven shall be shaken. But for those who are clued up about the final stages of world history, he said, "So likewise ye, When ye see these things come to pass, know ye that the kingdom of God is nigh at hand. For those who still carefully follow the prophetic compass with an open mind and deep prayer, and not allowing themselves to be misled by no pastor or church group, if they continue on this path, always looking to Christ and His word, they will always be one step ahead as they prepare themselves for eternity. It is sad to see the world spiraling out of control, and my heart goes out to the families who've lost loved ones because of the self-interest of others. Many people are trying to find a solution for world peace. There are those who believe that they can rise up against a government with arms. Now, I highlight what governments are doing so that you are in the picture, but I also encourage you as a policy of Even at the Doors to research and analyze everything that is presented. One thing which has made these studies possible is Bible prophecy. You see, prophecy is God foretelling us what's going to happen so that none of us are without excuse. And from the beginning of time up until our time, we see that there's been a constant struggle of God pleading with His creation to acknowledge His creator. And what prophecy does, it reassures us that the God of heaven has a love for His creation. It is not just for God's people only. It is for those outside of the church, so that we can share these things to show how real God is. It would be impossible for me to put these studies together if it wasn't for prophecy. You see, when I watch many different studies, many people can give you good insights into what is happening in the world, but with no solution. With prophecy, there is a solution. And I'd love to give you a challenge in this study. In Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 11, God says, "For I know the thoughts that I think towards you, saith the Lord, thoughts of peace and not of evil, to give you an expected end." So when you read in the Bible, we're seeing that God has our interests at heart. No matter how far we've gone in our lives, no matter how messed up we feel we are, God looks at every single one of us. And even if we don't feel worthy, God looks at us and still sees that there is something worth saving. When you look at all the madness in the world, it can be very depressing. But with Bible prophecy, God has forewarned us these things to prepare us for eternity. So I'll give you a challenge. If you want to really know how God is and how real He is, He says something to every single one of us. In Jeremiah chapter 29 and verse 13, God says, "And ye shall seek me and find me, when you shall search for me with all your heart." Feel free to subscribe to the Even at the Doors YouTube channel, where you'll receive regular videos. And you can follow us on Facebook and Twitter by clicking on the links below. I would just like to thank all those who have sent donations that have kept this ministry afloat. And if you would like to continue to support this work, also click on the link below. If you would like to see this work spread even further, you have permission to distribute this video for non-commercial or commercial use on the condition that you do not add or take away from the content of this study. Thank you.